weird. So weird. Great. On Friday, we went over what I would call the mechanics, the how to do everything, but we didn't actually take you through an example. So essentially what we're going to do today for these chi-square tests, I'm going to take you through 3 different examples of everything you need to do so that you understand the expectations on your test, which is in about 2 weeks. Test number 4 is in about 2 weeks. The final is in 3 weeks. I did do kind of like my side-by-side comparison of the final versus the test review, the course review. The course review has got everything that's on the final. It is much more thorough than the final is. So if you can do everything on the course review, you'll be in good shape. Theoretically, the course review can be found on Blackboard in the graded assessments, but I'll throw an announcement that links directly to it so you can go find it. Okay. I'm almost done writing test number 4, and I'll have that with everything you'll need to do on that as well in Blackboard, probably by the end of the day today, definitely by the end of the day tomorrow. Okay. All right. So here you can see a two-way table given to 100 college students about whether substance. Okay. So the idea for this would be, does the test work? Whatever this drug test is, right? So you would hope that if somebody is using drugs that you get a positive test most of the time and vice versa, right? Okay. So the first thing is whenever you have a two-way table, okay? Whenever you have a two-way table, that is like your first thing that's going to tell you pretty much that you are in fact going to be doing a chi-square test. Okay, so two-way table where we have 2 variables, test result versus whether or not someone's a drug user or not. Okay, so and whenever we have that, our null hypothesis is always going to be that the 2 variables are independent. My alternative hypothesis is always going to be that they're dependent. I'm going to ask that you write them in context. So I might say, for my null, test result is independent of drug use. Now, looking at this two-way table, okay, a reminder that independence would mean that we would have the same fractions all the way through. So, for example, 26 out of 33, you might say for drug users, it's 26 out of 35 who tested positive. The similar fraction to compare that would be 7 out of 65. So, as I'm looking at this, are these even close? Like 26 out of 35 is much higher than 7 out of 65, yeah? Okay, so we're very much going to get that this is dependent. And that's a good thing. If the test is working, the results should depend on what's going on with the individuals taking the test. Okay, all right, so from here, to calculate our chi-squared, what we could do is find those expected counts for each cell. A reminder, we would do that by doing the row total times the column total over the table total. We could do that all the way through, okay? However, as I promised, there is a calculator shortcut, so I was just gonna jump straight to that calculator shortcut if you guys would like, okay? So in order to use the calculator shortcut, what we need to do is give the calculator the raw data. So one of the things that gets a little bit we have to kind of think through as we tell this to the calculator is the calculator needs essentially this information. Okay? It doesn't need the totals. It only needs kind of like that, what I would call that raw data. Okay? And so, but it needs it in this form. Like it needs it in kind of this table form. Is everybody with me? Because it needs to know that these two are in the same row and that these two are in the same column. Is everybody good? All right. So what we're going to do is give the calculator a table. This is something that you may or may not be familiar with. So in math, a table is called a matrix. Okay? So what we need to do is pull up our matrix menu. So everybody stare at your calculator for a second. Does anybody see where we might find the matrix menu? Where matrix is written right here, yeah? Okay, so the reason I'm pointing this part out is if you're working the homework at home or whatever, you need to be able to find all these things on your calculator. So go ahead and hit second and then the X to the -1 button to bring up the matrix menu. And just like when we did data entry into the list, the first thing we have to do is edit our matrices. So you're going to go over where it says edit and hit enter. You can change these numbers on top so that it matches the numbers that we have. In this case, mine's already fine because I have a 2x2, 2 rows by 2 columns. And then you're just going to type in each piece of the table. Do we have this in? Okay. Then we're going to go over to stat and go where all of our calculator shortcuts are. So the matrix menu is how I give it the data. And then to find my important values, I go into that same menu, but you're going to go all the way down to option C where it says chi-squared test. When you do this, it says, the calculator says 2 things. The first thing is, where did you put the observed? The second thing it says is, where would you like me to store the expected counts? So the calculator does the expected counts all for you. Okay? So now we go down, we hit calculate. I find that my value for chi-squared is 41.51. And my p-value is 1.172 times 10 to the -10th, which I would call 0. Remember, your p-value should always be smaller than 1, so when you're getting something like 1.17, okay, that's your cue that you have to look and see that it's written in scientific notation. And we're going to make our conclusion. At 5% significance. You guys, is our p-value greater than or less than 5%? Less than 5%, and what does that tell us? That we reject. Okay, so we reject age 0. The test result is dependent on drug use. That's it. Now, if I go back into those matrices for a second, if I look at my matrix B, those I can say that for this one, the expected count was the 11.55, 21.45.
We need to write this
down. Like I said, I have to go back and look at, I haven't finished test number 4, and I didn't check the final for that level of, did they ask specifically what are the expected counts? So I don't know yet. So it's a pretty good habit, right? Because the big idea overall is we're saying, hey, like we're looking for the distance between these two things and trying to decide, is it a big or a significant difference, right? So seeing what you're actually comparing to is like, this is what it, if they're independent, is I should get 11 and a half people in this column, right? So it'd be surprising to get, 20. But if I got 12, maybe not that surprised. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, what are we looking for? What are we comparing to? I think this is what it would be if they were independent from each other. So it's a good habit. All right, let's look at another one. Okay, so this is our example from Friday where we were starting to look at this, right? My variables here were type of music, is independent from assignment completion. Okay, so our next step. Again, frequently students forget to go over to edit, and that's a source of frustration. Then you go up top. And so we have 2 rows by 3 columns. It's rows by columns, but if your calculator if you type that in backwards, it'll show you the matrix. You just flip-flop them. Put in your numbers. All right, so go stat or over to test. Just make sure you're picking, in this case, chi-square test. That's a large p-value. So what does that tell us? Fail to reject. So I got one more in the back. I want you guys to try that one on your own and then check your answers. Or not, they use some sort of list mine in a few minutes. How are we feeling about Unit 10? Okay.